What's up guys, it's Widgeon TV here. Today we're going to be doing another weapon comparison, this time of the Lance versus the Gunlance. So a lot of people suggested me do the Lance versus Gunlance in my last video, Hammer versus Greatsword, so I decided to give it a shot. And that brings me into the disclaimer of this video, and it's that this is by no means a comprehensive comparison of these two weapons. There is a ton of nuance to both of these weapons, and I do not have the time and I cannot directly compare most of these attributes. And if I put together a video that compared every single Gunlance versus every single Lance, and compared their every move in every single situation, well, first off, I would probably never get that video done, and everybody watching would be too bored to finish. Now that being said, I did put together a list of a few things that I thought I could compare between these two very pointy weapons. Alright, so let's take a look at the list. So the first thing that we're going to compare is possibly the most important part of both of these weapons, and that's the reach. And then we're going to be doing some DPS and damage comparisons between the draw attack and the opening damage. Then we're going to be talking about the excellent guard potential of both of these weapons, and then we're going to be taking a look at each weapon's X-Factor. That'll be a fun one for the end, so make sure to stay tuned. So before we get started on the list, let's real quick take a look at the two weapons that I'm comparing. First up, we have the Hard Bone Lance 1, which is a Rarity 3 Lance, and then we have the Bone Cannon 2, which is a Rarity 4 Gun Lance. Now I had to use a Rarity 4 Gun Lance instead of a Rarity 3 because the Bone Gun Lance is lagged behind in attack power compared to the Lances. But just keep in mind that both of these weapons are doing 322 attack, and luckily with these two weapons the bloat factor is exactly the same. So in my last video, the Hammer versus the Greatsword, I had to adjust everything for these two bloat factor numbers and show you the motion value of those two weapons to compare them, but in this case I'm just going to be comparing straight across and compare damage. So let's jump right into this with the first one on the list, the reach comparison. So this one was pretty hard to test because it was hard to line up each weapon in the exact same location. But after I found out that you move backwards every time you strike with the Lance and the Gunlance, I decided to use the camera to measure the reach distance of both of these weapons. What I did was position the camera directly overhead, and using the target log as a reference, I compared how much of that log was visible when the weapon could not reach it anymore. Starting off with the Gunlance, as you can see there is still a fair bit of the target log showing, and the Gunlance can no longer reach it. But this is considerably further than most other weapons can reach with normal attacks, and it's plenty far to keep you out of the danger zone. So that's the reach for the Gunlance. Let's take a look at the Lance. Doing the same procedure by lining up with the target and hitting it until I can no longer reach. But as you can see, the target very quickly disappears. It goes and goes until it is a long way off the screen, showing that the Lance has a considerable reach advantage over the Gunlance. And in my opinion, this is one of the biggest advantages that the Lance has over the Gunlance. It allows you to hit enemies that would be out of reach to pretty much any other weapon in the game. So the Lance handily beats the Gunlance in this category, giving the first win on the list to the Lance. Alright, so now let's take a look at the draw attacks for both of these weapons. Now, I'm not going to be doing DPS numbers for this draw attack because it's just that, a draw attack. You will not be doing sustained damage with this move, so DPS numbers would be irrelevant. So let's take a look at the Lance first. So even though I'm showing me loop these attacks, I'm only going to be calculating the first round of damage. So here's the Lance. And as you can see, the first round of hits does 82 damage. This number is pulled off fairly quickly by the Lance, and as you can see, this attack can be looped. Alright, so let's take a look at the Gunlance. The Gunlance has a very similar draw attack as the Lance, but it has 4 strikes instead of 3. So obviously, these attacks are going to do a little bit more damage than the Lance's attacks, so just keep that in mind. So here it is. As you can see, the Gunlance's 4 attacks produces 136 damage, outdoing the Lance by quite a bit of damage even without the 4th attack. Obviously this one can also be quickly looped, so this one's pretty easy. The win is going to go to the Gunlance. Alright, so now let's move on to the next one on the list, the opening damage. So like I said, I'm going to be calculating the DPS for these, and I'm going to be counting that by doing 2 rounds of damage. That will include a looping attack in the form of a cancelled counter attack with the Lance, and a quick reload for the Gunlance. Alright, let's take a look at the Lance's combo. As you can see, after 2 rounds of attacks, it does 186 damage. And now let's move over to the Gunlance, and here it is. And as you can see, after 2 rounds of damage, including a non-damaging quick reload, it does 382 damage. So now the interesting part is the DPS, because like I said in my previous video, with openings, time is everything. So let's take a look. The Lance pulled off its 186 damage in 5 seconds flat. That equals 37.2 damage per second, which is pretty respectable for a non-offensive weapon like this. Now let's look at the Gunlance. It pulled off its 382 damage in 9.32 seconds, but because it did so much more damage in that time, it came out with 41.3 damage per second, just barely beating the Lance. So these weapons are actually fairly close together when it comes to sustained DPS. The Gunlance can pull off higher DPS moves, like with the Wormstake and the Burst attack, but these sometimes require long reload procedures, and as far as sustained DPS, these moves fall short of the one that I showed you. So that all being said, and considering that both of these weapons are fairly close, the win is going to go to the Gunlance. Alright, so let's move on with the list. Next up we have both of these weapons' guard potential, and as a spoiler, both of these weapons have the best guard in the game. I did fairly extensive testing, finding out the damage losses when hit, and the stamina losses also, and I came to the conclusion that both of these weapons have the exact same guard. So if you're guarding with a Lance, it'll be the exact same as if you were guarding with the Gunlance. But that's not the end of the story. The Lance has several more options when it comes to guarding than the Gunlance, like the counterattack move that puts you behind a shield and will automatically attack if you get attacked. It also has a move that you can activate while in the counterattack, where you drop down on the ground and basically become invincible. You can't be knocked around even from the rear, although it does use a lot of stamina. And let's not forget that reach that we talked about earlier in the video. With the extra reach that the Lance has over the Gunlance, you can stay further away from the target, meaning that there's a smaller chance that it will get around behind you. All these things put together really show that the Lance is dominant from behind the shield, giving another easy win for the Lance. Alright, so let's move down on the list to the very last one, and that is the XFactor. So the XFactor consists of 2 very important moves for both of these weapons, but they cannot be directly compared. And those moves are the sprinting charging attack by the Lance, and the Wyvern Fire by the Gunlance. Both of these moves can be very effective in the right hands. The Lance's sprinting attack can be devastating against multiple monsters, and the Wyvern Fire can dish out an extreme amount of damage multiple times during a fight. Both of these moves are very important to both of these weapons' kits, but like I said, they can't be directly compared, meaning that both of these weapons tie in this category. Now it's time to ask you guys what you think. Obviously, both of these weapons can be great in the right hands, so obviously let everybody have their own opinion and try to keep it civil in the comments. Alright, that's all I have on these 2 weapons. I really hope everybody enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to like and consider subscribing. It really helps out my small channel. Also, consider following me on Twitter. It's the best place for me to keep in contact with you guys. But anyway, this has been Widgeon TV. Thanks for watching, guys.